Welcome to the second in our series of podcasts brought to you by the New York State Psychiatric Rehabilitation Training Academy. Today's topic is working with diverse populations, paying attention to implicit bias, anti-racism, and anti-oppressive practices, and racialized trauma. It is honestly an honor for me to introduce to you our host, Lenora Reed Rose, and her guests, Kelly Dumas and Marie Gillum. So without further delay, here is our host, Lenora.
Hey, we are so excited to be having this conversation and sharing it with you, our participants. And because it's a dear topic to us, and I know it's a dear topic to you, and we know that you will glean, you will learn, you will be able to engage with your staff and with those you serve a little differently. That's our hope, so that individuals can get the outcomes that they so deserve and they can be rather successful. Today, I am Lenora Reed Rose, and I will be along with my colleague Marie Gillum, the host, and we have Kelly Dumas, our very esteemed guest, who will be joining us for this conversation. And we have Kathy King as well. And Kathy is the engine behind the work that Marie and I do. So we're going to start out with Kelly. Would love you to tell us a little something about you, how you would talk about yourself. What do you want our audience to know about you? This is what they normally call a bio.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me first. And so, in terms of a bio, I would say I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm the chief operating officer at Best Self Behavioral Health, where I've been here for 11 years. That's usually, I guess, in terms of a bio intro. I kind of give people those. There's so much more to it, but I try to keep it to those major components.
Yes, thank you so much. And, I'm glad you said that because there's so much more to who we are. And very often we're wrapped into a title, or very sometimes we're just put in the box. Yeah. And today we're going to try to take the lid off the box, and we're going to open that box and kind of expose ourselves and probably become a little vulnerable, because that's who we're asking our clients to be as well, and our staff. Miss Dumas, how would you like me to address you? What would you like me to say? Kelly Dumas, Kelly, Miss Dumas, how would you like me to address you when we talk?
I would like to be addressed as Kelly. And I also have the same question for you. How would you like me to address you?
I am good with Lenora, Kelly. Okay. Very, very good. Thank you. Yes. And that is, I asked Kelly that deliberately. Because very often, depending on the groups that we're working with or the individuals we're working with, they have special ways in which they want to be addressed. When it comes to sometimes or more elder individuals, especially individuals of color, and I know in the Black community, I'm Black, that very often people want to be addressed as Miss. I grew up and I had to address, it didn't matter who it is, but I had to address my elders as Miss or Mr., and then depending on how close they were, as aunts and uncles. So I have a lot of aunts and a lot of uncles. And I am a lot of aunt. I'm an aunt to many, many individuals. And it's interesting. Sometimes I go on a call or something, and I'll hear Miss Lenora, and I step back like, oh, who is that? Then I realize that, oh, it's a person of color who is realizing that I'm a matured individual, and they're giving me the handle that they think I deserve. So Kelly, thank you so much for sharing that. And as we go along, we're hoping that you will gather tidbits from our conversation. So, like to be identified as Kelly, we got that. How is there any other identification that you would like us to know? What else would you like us to know about you? So for me, I am a mother, and I wear that, very proudly. Today's my daughter's birthday, by the way, so I'm excited about that. Yes. I am a mother, and I want that to be considered as you engage with me, depending on where I am. And sometimes, it varies. So what other identification do you have, Kelly? What other way you would like us to know you? How else would you like us to know you?
Yes, I appreciate this context you set, because my hands are sweating when you told me to call you Lenora, because I'm like, I want to call you Miss Lenora because too, I was raised just, I should not reference you by your first name out of respect. So that's difficult. But however, coming into work culture, I learned that some of these norms and ways that I grew up with, we have to put aside. So in terms of me, other way, it's difficult at times I know people like to put context to us, and we tend to want to categorize people professionally. But for me, I love to be, I guess, if I could bring my whole self into spaces when I'm coming in, and not just about my professional self. I'm a woman of faith. That is very, very, very important to me. And even though I can't often speak to it, I bring that to work with me. It's with me throughout the day. I'm talking to God. I might be praying. I'm singing. I have little sayings on my desk and things to encourage me. So being a person of faith and my spirituality is important. I'm a mother. I have all these titles, and that's the thing. It's like I want people to see me as Kelly Dumas, and I have so much that comes with that. So I'm the minister of mental health at my church and the director of mental health. And then I'm the executive director of the Healing Hub of New York. So I have so many different titles and work that I do. I like to be, I guess, seen as like a servant leader, a family-oriented person, a person who I try to be grounded in my spirituality, and a lover of all people. So those are some ways that I like to be considered. But oftentimes I find when I'm going about my work, there's not really space for that. I think over the more recent months, I've taken some liberties to bring some of that into spaces, because I don't know, it's almost like unspoken norms that, that's separate, that's not, that's not professional, or that doesn't belong here, but that's who I am. So
that's interesting. That's very interesting. As I listen to you and I think of what I would describe as the traditional organizational setting, and says, I wonder if there are conflicts. Does as she tried to weave, to put herself into this the setting, especially that of the CEO of Best Self. And as she tries to navigate all the different titles and the expectations of those titles, what kind of conflicts do you experience conflicts in trying to do that? I think of your spiritual self, and I also equate that to the working with diverse populations, because a lot of our individuals of color or BIPOC individuals share some of those same things that you reference. So what are some of the, if conflicts, what are some of them? And my follow-up question, Kelly, is going to be, how the hell do you navigate them?
You got me sweating again. Because and really,
and you're not in Jamaica. It's not up there.
These conflicts, they exist, but I don't typically have opportunity or space or feel, to talk about them, and how do you talk about them, but they're real. So first, I will clarify, I am not the CEO, I'm the COO. So
thank you so much. COO.
Yes, the Chief Operating Officer.
Chief Operating Officer. Thank you.
Yes, that CEO is a whole nother level.
And we can get there, girl.
Ready. Yeah, I don't know if they're ready yet. But yes, so Best Self, where I work, we're a very large organization. So as you say, so we we work with diverse groups and populations, and then the workforce that I'm kind of, I oversee operations. So we have over 1,200 employees.
Wow.
And so we want to ensure we not only talk a lot about equity, inclusion, and belonging, but we need to make sure that we're actually doing that. And what does that mean? And so I guess just to speak in terms of sometimes in some of those marginalized groups, I found, and it was uncomfortable, it was rubbing up against some of my upbringing as it relates to my religion and my beliefs, my spirituality. I come from a Christian faith background. And so, and we've actually, because we started having here spaces that we call courageous conversations. And really they started centered around race related areas. And for me, like that, I could talk about race all day. It doesn't take a lot of courage because it's the life that I'm talking about, my life. It was a courageous conversation for me to like sit down and talk about LGBTQIA plus. How does that, being a Christian woman of faith and the values that oftentimes come along with that, how does that resonate, and how do I intersect those pieces? Some of my I have family members who are part of the community, as well as many staff and employees who I work with often, so it's like, how do you balance what is this for me? I think my faith is very important. And more importantly, I'm a lover of all people. So that's why I say when I try to define who I am, who is Kelly Dumas, I feel like as part of, I'm here on this earth, I'm put here, it's not my place to judge or to determine how anyone should be showing up or living their life or anything. It's just I strive to be fully open and accepting and loving of all people. So when I'm moving forward in terms of looking at practices and because we looked at, again, we want to make sure that even our policies, our practices, they're equitable, they're recognizing all marginalized groups. And so I don't necessarily want to say that I feel like I need to set aside my faith, because I feel like that's ingrained and it's part of me. But I can definitely say it was a very, very uncomfortable space for me that I had to figure out what do I do with this? I'm in a seat where I'm in a position of a lot of power, decision making, and I want to do the right thing with that. I want to make sure that I am seeing everyone and that I am, operating in a way that is equitable across the board. And so I had to have some conversations with folks about that and try to work through that. I often check myself in all areas because I'm human.
That's a tight seat, Kelly. That's a tight seat. And thanks for being open on that, because that's one of the challenges that a lot of people face. It's and you, boy, I give you courage. I love your courage and being vulnerable and opening yourself to that kind, because it is real. It really, really is real. And for a lot of individuals, it's not for them. What do I do? Some people throw it under the bus, some people ignore it, so they do a lot of stuff. And at the end of the day, or folks, staff and clients who come to us for services, they get the raw end of the deal. They really do. I like the fact that you start out with, love, that of loving everyone and using that kind of as the process, that loving to help to guide you. And you're paying attention to your own implicit bias. And you're also recognizing that you sit in a very powerful position, and power has a lot to do with racism. It has a lot to do with oppression. It has a lot to do with trauma. And very often it's that power that we abuse.
That's right. That's right.
And we use our positions to make claims at the expense of others. So, oh my gosh, I'm really, really thankful that you stepped into that one, because I wasn't sure where you were going when we talk about conflict, but that's a hot topic.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of those topics that
yeah.
we can probably revisit. Because you guys are from Jamaica, and coming from Jamaica is a very hot topic in Jamaica. And growing up, I'm not sure how it is handled these days, but it's still on the books of the law that it's illegal to be LGBTQ. Although I must say that a few years ago, we had our first member of parliament that's actually a gay man. So it really has come a far way. And as I know, Jamaica is looking on their legal stuff, that they're wiping that away. And then there's a big rub with the Christian world. But it's a reality. It's a reality. And I'm glad, that you have actually, shared that.
Thank you. And I look at it too, so my faith, I bring back into it, because I remind myself I'm on assignment. And so for me, in my head, I'm like, okay, Kelly, these are God's people. I see all of us because again, for me, this is the lens that I look at the world through. My faith is important to me, and my spirituality. So these are not so I have to be careful with, I'm being entrusted to God. We're all God's people. God created all of us. So I have to be careful of how I move and be mindful of that. So that's how I keep my faith centered in those spaces.
Yes. And as you are aware, and I want our listeners to be aware, that we're kind of going down this track because we do not leave any of us behind.
Right.
When we walk through that door, when we get into the space of work, we take all of us into that space. So we take the space who's still struggling with, how do we address LGBTQ? From what angle? From the patient, the client angle, from the staff angle, from the operational angle, what are the safeguards that we need to put in place to ensure that each individual, doesn't matter who they are, where they're from, that they get the benefits of the services that this organization provides. And each individual can achieve the outcome that they so deserve, the successful outcomes. And many times we are the barriers. We come into this place kind of, we're in this powerful position, and a stroke of a pen, we can make a difference. And I'm glad that we're actually having this kind of conversation, so that as much as we're saying we are serving, we're this, we're that, all these implicit biases that we bring to the table, if we don't check them, it does derail the successful outcomes of people who we work with and those who we serve. So, as we're on this path, Kelly, are there things in your role as COO that you'd had to put in place, not just as it relates to gays, lesbians, but just in general, to ensure that love that you speak of, that transcends everything, and that you're able to, that your staff and your clients are able to be successful? Did you have to step in and say, okay, if this is where we're going as an organization, what are some of the things that we must have in place to ensure? Because Lenore is not going to do it just because you say. I probably need a little nip here, a little nip there to say, come on, girl, get in line. So what are those in-line things that you had to put in place, if any,
to
ensure that this happens?
Yes. So here at Best Self, we have a very strong race, equity, and inclusion initiative that I started some years back, and really came out of me being the only Black person at this level of management, and I wasn't at it. I was at a senior level, but it had always been that way. So from a courageous conversation, identified, why am I the only one? And did you notice I was the only one when I was at this level? And then once I moved up to vice president, I was able to hire I wasn't trying to hire other Black people, but I'm nervous. I don't want people to think I'm only trying to, but I'm hiring who's qualified. But why aren't they across the other areas of the organization? So it really caused us to take a look at, what is that? We need to look at what's happening. There's some force at play here, because you're right. And so that's how we started our race equity work that we've been moving forward with since, it was before the murder of George Floyd. I know a lot of organizations took off after that, and we had started a little before that time for this reason. So we did put some measures in place, and it has not been without challenge. Lots of challenges, which, I mean, actually, even right before coming in here, we are all often evaluating what we're doing, how we are walking the walk and not just talking it. So we have groups we put together. We first started off with getting some training and looking at a racial equity and inclusion analysis tool, like a framework that we can kind of evaluate our practices, our hiring processes, all of our human resource policies and procedures. And we gathered a group of individuals across the organization of various levels, from management to front office to counselors and we created some committees, and we started doing this work, evaluating, and it was challenging, but we would apply this lens of, how does this policy, or how is this that we're looking at, how does it impact marginalized groups, intentionally or unintentionally? How might this land? And so in order to have those conversations, you have to have these individuals, we have to be at the table as part of identifying that. And then we would have to take those next steps of making the change so that we don't have the unintended impact. So we made a lot of changes we had dress code policy that was just a traditional, what that is. We made so many changes to our HR manual. And of course, this group made recommendations to the executive management team who had to final approve. So it was important that we put work in to make sure all levels of our organization was understanding of this work, that where the priority of this work lied, and was on board with it so that we can really make some things happen. So we put some things, we started doing panel interviews because we all have unconscious biases. So those are going to bleed through unintentionally if you're doing one-on-one interviews, So we talked about that, and we trained those of us who do interviews and made sure we would pair up in 2 or 3, and that we had race diversity so that we would be sure that we had a process in place to check those unconscious biases. And that helped us to improve our race diversity rate percentage at the executive and senior because it was also important that one of the things I noticed, a lot of our staff of color were at the entry level, janitors, cooks, clean, and it's like the higher you would go up, we would kind of disappear. And it's like, no, we need to be in decision-making positions as well, like we're qualified. So these practices helped us to be able to bring in very qualified. We looked at, almost every job description, most of them required an advanced education. Well, is that really a requirement, or that's like a preference? And then that's a way that we're unintentionally screening folks out. So we removed all of those pieces. So those are some of the things that we put in place.
Wow, Kelly, thank you. Wow. That's impressive. As you talk, one of the things that I keep hearing over and over again is something that I truly believe in and my staff believe in, is to do this work, we have to be intentional about it. We have to be very deliberate about our actions. We cannot be come see, come sign. We can't be, just let's wave in the wind, wherever the wind blows, we go with it. We have to be very thoughtful, very planful. And I love the fact that you started with an evaluation. Because for us to get anywhere, we're at A, we want to go to B. We got to figure out where we are. And an evaluation is one of the things that always helps us to get there. So as we think about our populations that we want to work with, that's one of the places that very often we need to start. And sometimes we don't have the dollars or the hundreds or thousands of dollars, hundred thousands, because evaluation is actually very expensive. But there are tools out there that you can use and places that you can start. You start with a committee. That's excellent, because you're not saying it's all about Kelly. It's not all about Marie, not Lenore. It's all of us together. How can we bring all our different thinking so that putting them together, we kind of helping us to be aware of our own blind spots, our own unconscious bias, and leaving it open so other thoughts can come in. I like the walk in the walk and not just the talking. It's easy to talk. Oh my gosh, it is easy to talk. Since Black Lives Matter, since Floyd, there've been a lot of talk. A lot of people have gone and changed their websites. They have had these announcements, these grandiose statements. We're anti-racist, we're this. But when you open the door, you bust open that door and go in, nothing has changed other than a statement on the website. So this is really, truly a lesson on all this, some of the things that you have had to put in place and what you had to do to ensure you and your team. I love the fact, and one of those individuals who say, if we identify a problem, we can come up with a solution. And you identify the problem and you begin to work at the solution. How successful have you been, would you say? Or do you see yourself making forward steps and backward steps? How has it been smooth? Because that's kind of one of the challenges that we have when we do this work. We kind of go in there expecting to be smooth, but I don't know of any Bible that says, oh, here's the diversity and inclusion Bible, and you start from Genesis and you work your way through to Revelation. I don't know of that. So how has it been?
Ooh, it has definitely not been smooth. They tell me I'm very hard on us because I often tell, I'm the one that's always sitting in the room and saying, we have a lot of work to do, you guys. And so sometimes I am reminded and said, Kelly, can we please, we've done some things, and can you, and when some new people come in, often with fresh eyes, often I will hear from them. They're like, oh my goodness, I can't. So it helps, but I am constantly, I guess, seeing all the work that so I feel like we've made good progress. It's like an ongoing, because I mean, when in trying to, and really doing this race equity work and really being about it, it's quite complex and it makes everyone uncomfortable. And so when I say from even within the races, the BIPOC community, so it's like moving forward and creating the various committees, because I think we have 6 different we call them the different REI committees. They were predominantly Black staff and white staff, but the other races, and we have a high population of Hispanic staff, immigration staff from all, we hire a lot.
You're
yes.
I said you're Buffalo.
Yes. So it's been a challenge trying to get people involved and feeling like this space is truly for everyone. This is everyone's work. I'm trying to that it's like, this is not I don't own this space. I'm trying to create this space for us all to come in together and do this work. And of course, I come with my lived experience. And so I can speak best to that when we're doing this work, but I need others at the table as well who can bring their diverse lived experience so that we can, do this work together. So I think from the beginning that continues to be and it may always be that way. And then there are so many different ways to go about doing the work. It's like, I guess if you sometimes some of us joke in terms of the approach, are we Dr. Martin Luther King, or are we taking Malcolm X? It's different ways to show up in this space and do this work. And so I think as an organization, we had to define, I feel like, this space is for everyone. And so I wanted to be I am mindful of words, because sometimes I think it's easy to hide behind safe space. So we use brave space because things can be uncomfortable, but we want to invite people in to be uncomfortable. And then we can learn it's okay. If you say something wrong or if you do something wrong, that's okay. We won't nail you to the cross. Let's talk about it. And it's not about being right. It's about getting it right. So now let's get it right and talk about it. So trying to create an environment like that of this is how we want to do this work here. And it's at a big organization like this, it's not without its challenges.
Yes, I can imagine and listen to you, and you hit it so many times, and we got to have the courageous conversations. Courage, we just have to be willing to let ourselves out there, be vulnerable, and we just want to make it work. You speak about wanting to make it happen. You have a group that's committed to making it happen. So over and above your job, the getting in, there's something that you see, but you don't see that making it happen as so separate from the job. You're seen as a part of the job, because it seems like you recognize that if it doesn't happen, your staff and your clients will not enjoy the outcomes that they should have. It's a huge part of it, and you want folks to be in that space that at the end of the day, gosh, I had a tough day, but you know what? I feel good about it. I feel good about myself. I feel that I was seen, I was honored, and I wasn't overlooked because I'm a Black person or an immigrant. And as you were talking about Buffalo, I just remember I've done a lot of work with agencies in Buffalo, and if of course there are a lot of different cultural groups, lots of different racial groups that are in Buffalo. You have the border between Buffalo and Canada, and a lot of folks come over, and you also experience language disparities, language challenges, dialects. And, a Black person is not just a Black person.
That's right.
A Hispanic is not just a Hispanic person. And that's where, when we talk about inclusion and working with diverse populations, if we go back to our earlier conversation about identifying who you are and what are some of the things that make you up, what are some of the things that you would like folks to know about you, that, I'm very comfortable with this dialect. I'm not. And not because I said I'm Latina, it means that I speak this way, or I'm from Puerto Rico. I may be from somewhere else. So, you are trying really to engage. And it seems like you didn't touch a lot on it, but when your colleagues are saying, "Oh, Kelly, we've done a lot," that you a little bit and say, "Let's celebrate."
Yeah. They said we don't celebrate enough. They're like, Kelly keep pushing us so I'm trying to get a little. And so one of the suggestions I did share in some of the groups, I said, it probably would be, we really need to capture and maybe, in a space where we've been doing better with, so that we can really look back on, these are all the things we have accomplished. Because sometimes we climbing mountains, but all I see for miles are hills. So
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
seeing the hills that's still ahead, and I'm not really able to see what we've, and so I'm trying to make sure I get better balance on that.
Yes, yes, that celebration is important, and our staff needs, and in this work, because it is so challenging and it tests us in every which way, that a little celebration helps to lighten the load and to give us some encouragement in our courageous conversations.
I know my mind is all, I'm like, what are we celebrating? Do we have this work? But there's time for celebration. That we're not celebrating the finale. We're just, we're going to celebrate what we've accomplished, and then
let's enjoy the journey. Don't wait till we get to the end of the road for the big party. Let's have parties along the way. Yeah, because you know what you just explained to me, that we may not get to the end of that road in my lifetime and yours, because it keeps changing. You, especially where you are, and I know where we are in Rochester, New York, and where many of our participants are for this project, is you see folks every day. We see different folks every day. I came from Jamaica 30 odd years ago. So the person I am is going to be very different than the individual who comes from Jamaica last week or last month or last year. I would have assimilated stuff is going to be different. So with each new group, we have to begin to think about, with each not group, but each person that stands before us, and we got to think about, who is that person? What cultural nuances drive them? Do I have biases that I need to check? Because it doesn't mean because I'm a Jamaican, I don't have biases with all the Jamaicans. That doesn't mean that. What else do I need to check? And you speak about the BIPOC groups, that sometimes there are inter-challenges within our group. It doesn't mean that we're all on the same page. And I'm glad that you're recognizing that you're saying, I have to also recognize what's going on within the groups. And as we bring people together, are there some opportunities that you see that within this work, as challenging as it may be, are there opportunities? I know Buffalo has gone through quite a lot in the last year or so with the shooting of Black folks. Are there opportunities? Have you seen a way to turn around any of that, to say, darn, as bad as it is, here's an opportunity? And are you driven by opportunities as well?
Yes, I definitely, one of the things that I guess defer back to is you have to have hope and know that, we here in Buffalo, there's just it's felt like it's been tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. I just even before coming on here got another tragedy in the community, and it's compound sometime. And so also with Buffalo, race is a big issue that's not often discussed. However, it's kind of that underlying issue that really is present in many of these tragedies that are occurring. And so, I do, though, I think that there's opportunity. We have, I hear people talking more about and acknowledging the disparities and how the various systems impact various communities, and how do we intentionally work towards change. So I've been hopeful. So being in the behavioral health, the mental health space specifically, and how that system kind of impacts. I'm pausing because I think I've heard, we say marginalized groups, and I keep in my head, I know not everyone likes that term. So that's why I get it out. Don't want to be called marginalized, but the different, so I have been a part of state conversations and discussions acknowledging how the system, the behavioral health, the mental health system acknowledges the need for more race equity and taking intentional steps to make those changes to make sure people of color are able to get access to treatment and services that are going to be beneficial to us. And they may be what's called non-traditional. But so then how is that worked into the system? How is that recognized by the system as this is legitimate treatment and services, is culturally, based, and it's okay, it's appropriate. So I see opportunity. I have seen, so the state of New York, they paid for, I think it was 200 folks to get certified in Sawubona healing circles. I was the first one, I was told, to get the certification. I went through the first cohort and completed the process, but Sawubona means I see you.
Yes.
And so at the core of it, we all just want to be seen and heard. And so the fact that the state paid for this training to happen, to me, there's hope and there's opportunity, and there's at least some forward moving progress in saying, okay, we recognize there's some inequities in our system and in the help as it relates to mental health, and we're willing to take some steps. I'm hoping to continue. That gives me hope, and hoping to see there will be additional steps, because we can't stop there. There's still a lot within that system. And that's just one, so there's so many different. So again, I hear conversations happening, and so I think there's opportunity. In some ways, I feel like we're kind of at a crossroads. So it's really up to us as to where we go from here. Yeah.
One of the things I like that you mentioned is race. It's and looking at an opportunity around race, because I really think it's a tough one. I myself get a little challenged when I find that people, many folks don't want to talk about race. It's not an easy topic to talk about. It brings a lot of angst for folks, even folks of color. Right. It's one of those concepts where we wish we didn't have to speak to it. And yet, if we don't speak to it, a lot of what we're talking about, when we talk about anti-racism, anti-oppressive practices, and racialized trauma, we won't even get close to an end. Because so much of what is happening, so much of our experiences, especially people of color, it's around race. I remember when I just started doing this work, and I had to do a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of stuff. And I'll never forget, and I still use that slide, that when we walk into a room, the first thing that people see is the color of our skin. And judgments, we begin to make judgments on that. And then they may see our gender as they see it. Beyond that, you have to dig deep and do some questioning. And we kind of started out like that today, to get beyond some of the racial stuff. But we cannot negate it. And I think that's where that's where a lot of the opportunity is. A lot of the opportunities are being able to face that, to be open, to have the courageous conversation around it. Because once we get beyond that and we are seen, I want to be seen. You want to be seen. Everyone wants to be seen, and want to be seen for who they are, not to be seen the way you want to define us, but want to be seen as who you are. How do you then, Kelly, how do you see, I'm going to go shift a little to the staff, because for staff don't get it, it's hard for them to pass on to our clients. How then do you encourage your staff to be seen? How then is there, do you have anything in place, anything in particular? Can you give us a gem that you say, you know, here's one of the practices I encourage to, so I know my staff is seen and seen for who they are?
Well, I think, I don't know if I have a gem or not, but
You have given us many, just speak your
oh,
mind.
okay. I was going to say, to me, I think it's important to acknowledge and say that the importance of you showing up as your authentic self. Like we say that, we acknowledge that, and then how can you show up as your authentic self? Now, I know people can't see my office, but you saw there was a day where I would never have these photos and things on my wall. You have the big Afro woman with the positive affirmations and the colorful flags and the praying women. And so that's a way for me, when you walk into my space, so we have different spaces, but in this space, when you come in, I think when you walk in, I want you to see me. And so one way that I do that, but I've always, I guess over the years, I felt like, you know, okay, no, I got to be professional. You can't put any praying people on the wall. I had to hide them in my desk, put up just, you know, specific types of photos. And so I think, you know, how do you show up? There's different ways of doing that. And so allowing people and being open to allowing people to define that and how they want to express that, because it may be different for some people. Felt it was important to them in how they dress. I mean, we even had, and for some people, and being that it was here, it was weird now when I think back on it, but we did have very, I don't know where they was like that for years, but in terms of your hair, it was like specific rules in terms of, you know, no color in your hair was allowed, and these, it was like, wait, what? You know, so where does that stuff come from, and how does that get in the way of people being able to show up and be seen as who they are? So I am me, regardless of the color of my hair, regardless of my braids that I have in or whatever. So I think just talking about it, affirming that this is a space where we are saying that we want you to show up authentically, and we want to support you in doing that, whatever that means. And so I don't necessarily define it, and try to remain open to what that could be for different people.
That's huge. That's huge, because you have not defined what authenticity means to each individual. And you're encouraging folks to show up as their authentic selves, you know, whatever, and be comfortable in how they show up, being respectful to the workplace, but still within who you are. If you want to wear your kente cloth, you want to wear your, it's okay. It's okay to be that. And we all know that the way we feel about ourselves, that transcends into how we operate and how we treat others. Is there anything, as we think about the working with diverse populations and paying attention to implicit bias, anti-racism, anti-oppressive practices, and racialized trauma, is there anything that you can share with us that you're saying that we just addressed one thing about your staff? Is there anything else that you can say, okay, for my clients to get this kind of outcome, I'm paying attention to these things in this way? Is there anything that you can share with us to say, here's some of the things that we're very focused on, because we want to make sure that we're paying attention to this?
Right. I think probably most important. We just here at Best Self completed a Indigenous psychotherapy. We had 22 staff go through and complete that. And so we're trying to be intentional about equipping staff and we offer.
Can you say a little bit more about that? I'm trying to cut to you, but that's unusual. Can you say a little bit more about that? What that entails? Indigenous psychotherapy?
Yes. Wow. So it is a framework that is centered on working with Black families and working from a lens of strength and being able to identify what's working and how we build and elevate that. And so the great thing about working from this framework is it is centered on working with Black families and individuals, but it works with any and every one. So that's the beauty of when you're applying race equity, is not that it just only benefits people of color, but oftentimes when we're not operating in this way, people of color are left out. And so what we're doing is not including cultural differences and those components. So we went through 12 weeks of training and working with some esteemed doctors and folks to get the staff trained. And we had diverse staff in there, various race backgrounds. So it was good. And so we try to equip staff with the tools and resources when we talk about how do you show up? What does it mean to engage the community of color, individuals of color, people? What does that look like? And how do you, and oftentimes it's that awareness, because we're all people, we're individuals. So I want you to see me. And so that doesn't mean that when I come in, you have an ascribed way already in your mind of who I am, but that you allow space for me to come in and to show up and understand that I may show up looking a little differently than what you expected from your textbook and what you were trained. And so you have to be open enough to see that and see me, hear me, so that you can't help me if you can't see me. So it's really working with, that was just one training. We have a few, like we're doing concentrated work with different areas of the organization. We're bringing in a consultant to work specifically with different programs who engage more with our communities of color. And we have areas in the organization where we still lack race diversity. And we think it's important then community that you are aware of how do you operate in an equitable way where people feel that it's safe, that I'm able to come here and get better, because ultimately we're hoping to help you get to a better place than what you were when you walked in the door. So how do we do that? Well, by seeing you and listening to you and respecting that you are the expert on you and your life's journey. And so it's a two-way street. So for me to really help, I need to also hear from you, and you're a part of, you are the center of the plan. So that's just how it has to go.
And we're back again to intentionality.
Yes.
We're back again to being deliberate. Mm-hmm. That for us really to move along this continuum to get to be successful, our clients and our staff we have to be deliberate. We have to put things in place. We have to do training. But what I like about what you said, that as much as the training, the focus of it may be how do you engage with people of color or with Blacks, that it's for everyone. And everyone benefits from it, because you're not saying because it is focused on Blacks, you're negating people of other races and of other cultural groups. Like one of the things I normally say to folks, that we have this box that we call, when we analyze our data, we call white, we call it Caucasian, we call it European American. And when we begin to unravel, there are many different cultural groups in there. And we don't take time to pay attention either to the nuances of individuals within that group. And as you share how you have done special trainings with your clinicians and your other staff members so that your clients can benefit from it and have successful outcomes, I am sure that all the other cultural groups, because you'd be bringing in and taking into consideration the cultural nuances of others as well. Because like we mentioned earlier, Black person is not just a Black person. They come in we have many different things. We're made up of many different pieces. And those are the pieces that you're beginning to address not just with Blacks, but for other,
That's right.
but with other cultural groups. This is so powerful, and I'm glad that you've been so intentional. I know other folks within New York State that they're doing this work, and I've not had the opportunity and the pleasure to engage with other individuals, but I'm just so I'm so pleased that you're looking from it from every angle, that you're doing your intention about what you do for the clients, what you do for the staff. And I'm going to ask you, kick it up a notch to, if we think of the organizations, that there must be some things that you'll have to put in place in the organization to create the infrastructure to support all these changes that are happening. Mm-hmm. So, for example, we know if we drive too fast, we'll meet an accident and we'll do da da da. Mm-hmm. So we change the laws. You can't drive more than 65 miles an hour. But within the infrastructure, we have penalties and we have those things. So are there things, not necessarily penalties, but are there things that you have, if you look in, you talk about your HR, we look in your policies, you look on your guidelines, you look on your organization as a whole, are there some things that you're saying we must do these things to ensure that all this training, all this thing is nested, and if Kelly moves on, it will be here. It will not go away. It will stay because it's so nested into who we are as an organization.
That's right. Absolutely. So the basic piece is it definitely has been incorporated into how we evaluate, every year, for new hires, 3-6 months, and then annually, we all receive evaluation. We incorporate how we expect folks to engage in inclusion work, and specifically race equity being a core value of our organization. It's identified as such. It's encompassed into we developed a leadership philosophy that we've been working with. And we've done that within the last 6 months. So again, being intentional in the language that defines who we are and how we expect our leaders to show up, and how we expect people to approach their work. Been intentional about job descriptions. It's written right in there, like to let people know up front, we value race, equity, and inclusion, and of course, the diversity of all people, and specifically because when you say diversity, oftentimes, if you're not specific about race, it gets left off just because it's difficult. So for me, as we created narrative and language, it is important that we are clear when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we specifically name race, so that it does not get left off. And so we work that language into what defines us, of how we operate. And so I think it's important to have those, because you're right. And it was something that I was concerned about. Like, this has to live on. How does this live on? It has to get infused into who we are as an organization and how we operate. And so it has to become ingrained and how we define ourselves as an organization. And so it was very important, the executive management team, that all of us, all members of the executive team, that we prioritize this and we understand it, because ultimately we are defining and redefining who we are, in terms of how we're going to go about our work and our practices. And so we are intentional about including that. And then we roll that out to all the staff. And then we also spend time talking about, what does this look like off the paper? Like, how do you operationalize this? How do you show up within these leadership values? And what does this look like? And then holding people accountable when they're not showing up in these spaces in this way. So of course, again, always like to take a learning approach. And so, because we have defined these expectations, it's easier for us to see when people are not showing up in a way that we've defined how we want our leaders to show up. And so we can reflect back on that as we coach and support people and make sure they have the tools. And then sometimes you find that it's not a coaching issue, it's, and so then we need to have a conversation that this just might not be the organization for you. Like these, if you don't believe in these values and you're not willing to operate within these values and philosophies, then, this is who we are. And so, then that's just what we have. But I do think in terms of it living on, that has been an important step. And we're still doing that. Like we're like looking at everything. And we just, our executive meeting this morning was focused on that. How do we ensure that this is ingrained in every space of how we're defining who we are and how we work? And so we're doing that still.
Excellent, excellent. So you really are committed to the organization's needs to not just embrace it with a statement on our website, but embrace it in every facet of the infrastructure. Learning, you look on a learning approach, you're defining the expectations, because if people do not know what you expect of them, if they don't know, then, what do you expect? That's and very often we just throw it out there without being very specific and very deliberate about what it is that folks need to be doing. And you offer coaching and support to individuals, because it's not easy. This is not, it's a change, it's a transformation. It is not an easy thing. As much as I've done this work for many, many years, I still make boo-boos. And I have to be willing to step and say, ouch, Lenora, oh my gosh. But, if I can have the courageous conversations, get some coaching, get some support, and be open to that, then I know we can have better outcomes for our clients and for those who we our staff. And in the end, New York State will be a better place to be. It's we can go on and on about how much money we can save and all that thing and tied in, but wouldn't it just be so beautiful knowing that we are seen as individuals, and when we go for services, that we will get the service that we so deserve. So I'm going to ask you, Kelly, are you a one-man show? I don't think that is, but I know it seems like you're driving, you drive this whole initiative. Do you have other drivers at your leadership level, your executive team, or is it you at the executive team? Then you said you had your committee, but how would you define that?
So no, I'm not the only driver. I've been coined as the founder, which I was like, oh yes, because it was heavy on me to feel like I'm the only driver and I can't, it's a lot of pressure. So when I first started in this work, and for me, it's important to have white co-conspirators in this space. So we actually, there's 4 co-chairs. I'm considered a co-chair of our race equity work. We have our chief people's officer. He's a co-chair, a Black male. And then we have 2 white co-conspirators who are awesome. They're at the senior level management. They're both vice presidents. And so we meet regularly. We just met today as well. I had a lot of meetings today. And so we kind of spearhead and talk. And then we have a steering committee where we meet with there's 2 heads, and we tried to set the model where there's a person of color and a white accomplice, co-conspirator that heads each group. That was also intentional. We tried to allow space for that to also model like this is everyone's work. And so we want to call everyone in. And so we meet monthly with the chairs, and then we meet collectively with all the folks involved in the different subcommittees, and those subcommittees have their own separate work and meetings. So no, to answer your question, thank goodness I'm not the only driver. I have help. Sometimes I have to tell them, I'm exhausted, I'm tapping out for a minute, and I'm okay to do that because I'm not alone and they'll take it.
Yeah, that is excellent. If we were to, if we're looking for another Kelly Dumas, if an organization comes to you and says, you know, we really admire what you're doing, we see what's happening over here at Best Self, how would you define that? How would you help them to find the right person or someone with some skills, some competencies? What would be your guidance to them? What should they be looking for?
I do think it's important to find the right match, which doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be comfortable, because the right match should also be, if you're looking to bring in a person, this is difficult work. So if it's not uncomfortable, and if you're not questioning like, oh, that you're probably not doing the work. So you want, and so how do you find that person? And I think that it takes time and intent, and you probably need to me, I would say, when I'm considering, if I was at an organization, if I'm looking to consider folks or do interviews, I might want to have people at the table of this discussion with the ones I'm considering, people at the table who are in this space, who can help me with the evaluation. So you probably have to open up the process a little bit and invite some folks in to help you determine, having some conversations. But first of all, identifying what is it that we want to accomplish. And because you'll want to be able to clearly communicate that to whomever you're considering. What is it that we want to accomplish? Some people only want to go so deep into that. I mean, this can be very deep work. So you need to think about that. And then see, I mean, it's interesting. I have, I've heard many stories of people who at different organizations may be starting to get into this work. And I think sometimes maybe people haven't realized how uncomfortable it can really be. And so bringing someone in, it could have its pluses and minuses. I was internal, so I knew the culture of the organization. So I think there's benefit if you're able to have someone internally rise up to that level, because I'm familiar with the culture here. I'm familiar with the lay of the land. And so it made it easier, as opposed to an external person coming in who then will have to learn some of those nuances that will be important to make it work. And I just think sticking with it, because it might not work out. It's almost like I tell people when they're looking for a therapist too. Sometimes you have to talk to people, find out what framework they're using. Is this a person that's going to give me homework? Is this a person that is going to allow free talk space, or like, what is it that I'm looking for? And then you talk to different people and see what they're offering. And then you have to trust the process. You got to trust the process.
Yeah. Now that sound advised. But one thing that came up just now that we haven't addressed, and we will not address much today, that acknowledge that it's not just a culture of people, there's also the organizational culture. Yes. And that has to align or be in sync with where you're trying to go. You can't ignore the organizational culture and think this work is going to get done. You can't ignore the gossips, because gossips are usually more real than legal than laws. You can't ignore, I call the mayor, who knows everything and everybody and can topple the entire thing. There's some things that you really have to pay particular attention to as we do this kind of work. And we're getting to the close of our conversation, and I must say I'm really, really pleased. I think, thank you for sharing your thoughts and be so open and be so vulnerable. One of the things I'd like to ask you, and I'm going to bring in my colleague Marie to ask, is there a question or something she'd like to throw your way before I close out?
Thank you, Lenore, and thank you so much, Kelly, as well, for this really engaging conversation. I'm curious, Kelly, just based on this entire conversation, right? We've taken so much in, and you're really vulnerable with yourself, with what you're sharing. is there anything that we should know, right, to continue doing this work effectively, things that we might have not touched as of yet, and things that we can do better as a community as well? I'm thinking kind of specifically in this realm of flexible approaches to the work that we're doing, right? I know we talked about healing circles and some of the things specifically that are taking part in Buffalo. Is there anything that any resources or tips or things that we really need to be considerate about when we're doing this work going forward?
One of the, I guess what I would say is, especially, I have to remind myself at times too, being a person of color, fully immersed in this work, self-care is so important. This is difficult work. So with all the work that we do here at Best Self, we're not free of, that's why I say we have work to do. It's on any given day, I observe and experience microaggressions. And so it's like a constant where you have to know, and it's not because progress isn't being made. And that's why I think it's important to know that this is a journey. And when you engage upon it, it can be emotionally taxing. So how do you take care of yourself and so that you can continue the momentum? And so these healing circles and spaces, and that's what I love about some of the things that have been brought in, like the Sawubona healing circles and the indigenous psychotherapy, is designed to also be healing for those of us going through and facilitating those spaces and processes. So I think, I don't know that I fully anticipated how much it would draw from me emotionally to be actively engaged in this space. And when we talk about intention versus impact, it really doesn't matter. I work with wonderful people, so I'm clear on intention, and the impact of what happens at times still hurts just as bad, even though I know I'm working with good people. And so I have to go home and I have to do something with that so that I don't get so discouraged and throw it all in and be done with it. So I do think that self-care, connecting with other folks in terms of mentorship so that you can also continue to refuel and feed and be fed yourself is important in this work.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you talking about self-care also, because I think it's something, one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot these days, right? But I think kind of in relation to our stories and how we're all coming and we're showing up as our authentic self, that self-care is going to look different for everybody, regardless of how we identify it. It might look like something one week and might look like a nap the next week, but it's all part of that journey.
Yes. Sometimes I need to go home and have a good nap.
Yeah. And that is self-care, and that is okay.
Yes.
So Kelly, what keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night is this enough? I feel like, again, I guess in my mind, like I'm here to serve. And so, and I always want to operate in a way where I am of service and I'm benefiting others. And sometimes I'm up at night thinking about, am I within purpose? Is this enough? And how can I, because I'm one person. So how am I making sure this continues beyond me? This is not about me. It has nothing to do with me. It's important. So how can I do better at like getting this into others and making sure that this continues, because we all benefit from it. And so many people are relying on us to do this work and make these changes. So that keeps me up sometime.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Ladies and gentlemen, there we have Kelly Dumas, the COO of Best Self in Buffalo, New York, sharing with us conversations around working with diverse populations and paying attention to implicit bias, anti-racism, anti-oppressive practices and racialized trauma. She's been very vulnerable. And I hope you have learned as much from her as I have. Again, thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you for the opportunity to discuss.
Thank you, Lenora. What a fantastic, informative, and stimulating session. I would love to give a huge thanks to Lenora, Kelly, and Marie. Thank you all for an open and honest dialogue. I hope each of you learned as much as I did by today's podcast. I want to just remind everyone that this is only the second in a series of podcasts that we have planned for you. So please check our website for the next date of our newest podcast.